Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning or good afternoon, everybody, depending on what time zone you're currently maybe attending live, or also we'll be recording all these sessions, so welcome one and all. My name is Derek Krebs. I'll be leading today's session, and there's actually going to be a couple today. I'm going to start out with a couple of minutes in PowerPoint, introducing myself and the topic for today. Otherwise, the bulk of the time, we're going to be looking at the application and some nice little tips and tricks today. This session on reporting, and a little bit later today on the budgeting side within Prospero. So let me just take a moment to further introduce myself and some of the logistics of the GoToWebinar, especially if any of those are maybe new to the application or to GoToWebinar. First and foremost, there's a large group of attendees today. All of you are in listen-only mode. So if you have any questions, please do take advantage of the question panel there to the right. And within that GoToWebinar control panel, if it's ever blocking your view, there's an orange arrow that you can click that's pointing to the right or left to minimize or maximize that control panel. And you also can slide it down if it's ever blocking your view. So again, welcome one and all. Please do take advantage of the question and answer. I'll probably field that at least twice, that question log, maybe about halfway through, and definitely the last few minutes will be a nice little question and answer. Let me now introduce myself further. My name is Derek Krebs. I'm a senior consultant with the MSX group. And like you see my little background, a lot of our founding members and staff at MSX group has similar, where I've been in a consulting role for the past 25 years. And the first 15 of those years, we started at FRX Software. And then we were acquired by Microsoft, so we help develop, support, and deploy those flagship tools of Microsoft's on the reporting and budgeting side. And then as we had such great reporting and budgeting products, we got acquired. Then 10 years ago, we got spun off, and I'm so glad we did, because now we have the product and development back underneath our control, which really just means new features, functionalities that you've probably been lacking in their Microsoft era of those applications. So again, welcome one and all. I see a mixed bag of attendees today. Some that are existing customers, that might be just customers just within the last year, or even I see some that are long-term customers. And then secondly, I see some prospective customers that are maybe using the Microsoft stack, including there's a few partners that are looking to sell and deploy Prospero. So again, welcome one and all. Please do jot down my email. I'll probably pull it up a couple of times in today's session. So if you have any questions, if you're not able to take advantage of the question area, which I'll plug one more time in today's session, you can always email me afterwards. I'll be glad to address those, or if you're watching this through a recording subsequently. Today's session, I'm just going to bounce right to an Excel file for the agenda. It is going to be focused on the top 10 tips of reporting. So I just reflected in this nice little crash course for the next hour. What would be the most information packed I can give you within that 1 hour? So I'll give you a nice little overview of the ins and outs of the reporting side, not only on report viewing and consumption, but also on the administrative setup and design side, some tips and tricks on that. And I'll just paraphrase a few of these, like the first couple of lines 1, 2, and 3 on the tips would be taking advantage of the secure and electronic report viewing and distribution, versus I still see so many organizations doing things the old-fashioned way, meaning printed copies, exporting it to Excel, which I can't emphasize the inefficiencies there of not one version to the truth, maybe getting data in the wrong people's hands. There is key concepts of what we call published reports inside Prospero, so we'll definitely be leveraging those. And when doing so and consuming or viewing our published report, you have the ability to make some nice annotations of financial footnotes to those, graphing it, and the very bottom bullet point, maybe taking that out additionally to maybe Excel, PDF, or printer for extra analysis or ad hoc you want to work with the data. There's also a key term, what is called report collections. So how about month end? I'm in charge of, let's say, financials for all you 30 plus people on today's phone call. How about I send all of you 30 managers in our organization 3 financial reports. So I might seamlessly create an easy report collection, run that once for all of you, and publish that out. Now, just 1 second here. Looks like I had one extra little snafu of my screen presentation. So my apology on that regard here, as I have a few different monitors and we have a couple of also staff on the line here that reminded me of one extra little button I needed to click. So you should now see my screen. I was just talking about the agenda for today, introducing myself. And let me just continue with the additional agenda topics for today's report design. Additionally, we're going to be looking at some of the security aspects of it. We always call Prospero created by accountants for accountants. So you people in the finance and accounting that are mostly attending today will see how easy it is to set up users within the system, roles or groups regarding what access they have within the application. And then 2 other key words there are what we call security assignments and visibility. Assignments might be the different location or companies you have access to, or visibility might imply which reports or budget versions you have access to see or edit. A recurring theme within Prospero and the Microsoft flagship products was our good old lines, columns, and trees. How sweet they are, where we can interchange those to easily mix and match and build our reports versus this is not Excel hell. We're not an Excel add-in designer, so thankfully we can leverage those reusable building blocks. And the 6th tip is a feature what we call the expand, where we leverage summary accounts like total revenue or total expense, and that really reduces and usually avoids all of our report maintenance altogether. And then also we're just going to look at some other odds and ends regarding some report settings. So there's going to be a few of the topics and several more that I'm going to be sharing with you today in the next hour. Now, let me also just call out your attention. You attended today's webinar, maybe through an email newsletter that we always like to send out of upcoming educational opportunities, but let me at least point to our website of msxgroup.com. And there's going to be a nice little link here of our upcoming events. Like here is our nice little webinar schedule, especially for Prospero. And then additionally, we hold twice a year user forums, which is 2 full days of at least 7 to 8 hours of action-packed training. We hold that once in the fall time frame in spring. We just came off of our fall one, so do look for your emails and upcoming events that you hopefully can further gain some valuable knowledge and tips and tricks of the application. I'm now going to jump right into the application. And when doing so, I like to look at a couple of different roles within an organization you might fall within. Let me start with perhaps a CFO user or role. This might be a report collection, a keyword there. So how about every morning I log in and I like to see 2 financial reports that you see in the windows to the left. I could then expand those, drill down, which I'll get to in just a second. But then additionally, maybe I like to graphically display this dashboard data, maybe in a little pie graph, maybe a column graph seeing a little trend of revenue expense data. And then I'll further interact with that, like drill down, not only to the account and transaction level. We'll also look at that graphs I can do the same with. And then additionally, one of my favorite features is what we call the drill down order, where I can take one report, maybe drill first to a company, then location second, or I can easily on the fly change my drill order as I'm maybe bullet pointing a couple other items here that I'll be getting to the next few minutes. Perhaps I'm asking all of you, my managers, to explain some variances of actual to budget. So I want you to all add annotations to your financial reports. And then additionally, I'm going to show you behind the scenes after I show you the front end interaction of how we easily leverage, let's say, our line, column, and tree key concepts. I'm now going to bounce over, that's maybe a CFO roller perspective looking at the report collection, but let me also show you a second roller perspective, that being an end users. Now, within the end user, whenever you launch Prospero, we're going to obviously take advantage of the secure electronic report distribution. And whenever I open up Prospero, this takes me to a nice little quick launch landing page where I might have here in this column here headed reports and charts. How about I receive every month from my CFO 2 reports, favorable versus unfavorable income statement, and how about the report beneath it, a nice little rolling 12-month report. Or secondly, the column headed input. Maybe it's that time of the year where you want me to update my budget or forecast figures for the year. And I'm going to go ahead and open up this report. And as I do so, let me acquaint you with our demonstration company's chart of account. That might be similar to yours. Now, within our general ledger, we have multiple companies, but company is not a segment in our general ledger. However, what Prospero does nicely, if you're in a multi-company environment, it will create this new virtual segment to do seamless consolidations for you. And I'll show you a different perspective of that later logged in as a power user, because this end user, when I'm showing the company pick list, only has access to company 1, but we have actually multiple company that this user does not have access to, let's say, our candidate or elimination companies. Or secondly, we also have a location segment, and similar story. This user, end user, only has access to our Denver location. And third and finally, how about I'm in charge of the Denver that I'm now currently viewing, but yes, I do have access as I'm viewing the department list. I have access to all departments. Now, this is a very nice window because a lot of times I'm reflecting on other applications I've worked with over the years do not give me this flexibility and ease of use. One would be when I'm looking at my department pick list. This is what I call a list view, but here in the lower left, I can look at a graphical tree view. Right now, I only have one tree associated with this report and for our departmental segment, but I'm going to show you an example later on the location segment where I might have 2 different trees. Maybe one that's breaking out by geography, my locations, or maybe another by their function, like sales versus service functions. Another great thing about Prospero is I maybe rattle off about 20 or 30 new features within even today's short hour, is this tree called All, which automatically gets created and it automatically gets maintained, which is a huge win versus especially comparison to some old Microsoft ways of doing so. So we took the best of our experience with developing and deploying the Microsoft applications we brought into Prospero. Where they lacked, we obviously improved, and there's maybe 2 or 3 features just in this first couple of minutes there. Now, when I do open up the report, nope, I'm not sending it to Excel. I'm not sending it to PDF, but I'll show you some examples of that in case you do want to maybe further disseminate that data. But then here is the good old drill down, annotations, and me changing the drill order. How about the drill down? I'll just pick on any random line, like here's my sales when I drill in. When I do so, I'm drilling across all columns, meaning I drilled into sales. Here's my 2 departments, like sales and marketing. I could then see thereafter. I'm seeing it across all columns, like actual, prior year, and budget, because most of the competition, you only can drill into a single cell at a time, which stinks in their regard, but I love about Prospero's easy analytics there. Then additionally, that's what we call perhaps the account level when I drilled in to sales. And I'm just going to go into this one line here for marketing, and even I can now go to the transaction detail. Normally, you would see vendor, customer, and some other transaction detail information, but in this demonstration database, we shied away from that for legal reasons, but there is some additional details of perhaps who the revenues were received or sold to, like what customer or maybe what vendor I paid those amounts to based on how the journal entry is posted. But there's our transactional detail all at my fingertips. I'm just closing these tabs, and at any time I can right mouse click and multitask, because maybe I want to show these tabs vertically, meaning side by side, or horizontally. And as I do so, like vertically side by side, I can multitask doing some analysis, and I could drill through another account or 2. And as I go back full circle, that's really just what this CFO perhaps maybe saw a couple windows side by side that I could come up here and expand and then further consume and look at the information at a larger viewing window. As I return back to my end user, I'll just close out a couple of tabs here. I'll get back to what I call drill down order that I changed. But how about in the meantime, here's a nice little visual cue, this little blue dot or square. I hover on top of it. and excuse perhaps maybe the smaller screen resolution or font here, but basically there's a financial note that perhaps I've asked all of you, the managers, to explain your variances. So then me or others later reviewing your financial, like I'm currently role playing with, could maybe see why and who added that note and when. So over here to the right, I've minimized it, but I'll come up here and thumbtack that to not hide it. I have a nice little time date stamp. I'm logged in as a generic manager 1, but it would say something like Derek Krebs on this date and time, add this memo or note. And then maybe it might be the boss coming up here and say, like, Derek and I spoke, and here's our course of action. So you can have nice little dialogue behind your financials without having to pick up the phone or emails to explain maybe some key financial footnotes or annotations as it's phrased inside Prospero. At any time, I can graphically display and analyze the data as well. So here's an easy button on the toolbar to display this as a chart. This is an interactive chart where I can further drill into it. So how about here on some of my revenue or expense items, when I drill in, I have the same type of drill order because here might be my sales and marketing. And instead of seeing this data graphically, which also have some of the data points of how much percent of the pie this was, here on the options tab, I have a few little options here to show some data labels, the layout, etc. And also I can switch the layout back to what we call the report view. So here on the toolbar, I'm currently in the graph view, but here's a button here called switch to the report view, meaning instead of me seeing it graphically, I'm now seeing that data, in this case sales that I drilled into, broken out by the different next level, meaning the different departments of the one location that I'm viewing. I can also come up here, export this to Excel. Any file name and path, I'll just keep the default as is. And then all the bolding, font, formulas will also be transferred and seen in Excel for further ad hoc or sharing of that data. I call this a two-dimensional Excel file where we only have really one Excel sheet. But what I could do is take a report, like how about income statement by the different location and departments. Here might be all the locations rolled up, or maybe here's Miami's Department A, or Miami Department B, San Francisco, etc., etc. So another way to consume and view that financial data, in this case, Excel to multiple different sheets. And this was only one report, like an income statement. So how about finally, I have a nice little example here of a report collection. Let's go back to the CFO or even board member that every month they like to see 3 reports. Report number 1, income statement, or here's report number 2, balance sheet, or report number 3, statement of cash flow. And that's simply, again, a report collection where I run all those either to one single file, which yes, I'm broadcasting to one file, or they could be separate files, or even better yet, seen electronically, as I like to maybe go full circle of maybe this is my CFO looking at their report collections electronically. I'm going to be now showing you a few of those elements behind the scenes as a power user, but I'd like to show you first of all on the front end consumption side. Maybe one last little file format. Obviously, I can't really show you a printed copy easily, but here's a nice PDF. So here's an income statement where I'm looking at all companies. Or how about the second page down? How about that's our United States company? Or if I page down, how about that's our European company? And maybe I'm going to send this mail to my banker for my financials and maybe for my loan covenants, etc. All right. Let's now turn our attention back to some power user element sides. So I'm now going to go to the third role. The first was a CFO. The second was maybe an end user, but now the third persona, like most of you attending today's phone call, would be in the finance and accounting area. So I have all these buttons to the left, like the lines, columns, and trees, oh my, that I have access to. I have one report open, like that income statement actual versus budget I was just analyzing here. And then here is where I have the easy line set being used to the report and column. And a lot of times I assume that's sort of industry standard knowledge, but there's a few people on the phone call that are new and blue to Prospero. So what I wanted to share with you might be one or two quick little PowerPoint slides to show again the design element of a financial report easily within Prospero. So this slide maybe gives you a nice little graphical display to it, like there in the left in blue might be my row definition of an income statement. And I create that once, and I could maybe use it for 10 different reports or 100 different reports, which means the setup and later maintenance, if I change my mind of the structure, is so easy versus Excel hell would be a pain in the rear. After the row format there in blue, the second piece of the puzzle to a report that we have is a column. Like here in red, I may be looking at a month-to-date and year-to-date report, or a rolling 12-month, or actual versus budget, or maybe I'm showing my companies in columns. I just described maybe about 3 different reports using 3 different columns, but maybe all an income statement, all using this one row format, what I'll call income statement. Third and finally, after the row and column, we have our tree, which represents maybe the different responsibility centers, like maybe different companies and or location or departments that you have within your general ledger. And even we can incorporate non-general ledger data into our reports, like units sold, head counts, margins, and even more importantly on the budget side. So do stay tuned and maybe for other budget sessions here, as I mentioned a couple other keywords and topics we'll be dealing with throughout the day or the month. Now let me show you that same type of thought one last time. As my power user perspective, I have on the home ribbon this button here called Catalog View. That's an easy spot where I can inventory all the reports in the system. So I have a button here called Reports that I'm currently looking at. So here's report 1, 2, 3. Here's their line, here's their column, and then I have detail of who last modified the report and when it was last used, etc., which is a huge win versus some of the former Excel hell add-ins. I could also sort all of these reports by the line being used, as I just clicked on this line's heading. And then here's another validation to that, meaning here's all those 10 plus reports, all using the one single line set called income statement, versus a few of those people that are not yet moved to Prospero. And if you're ever considering Excel hell add-ins, I'd say probably shy away and do not do so because they're so tedious and cumbersome. You would see other competitor products, Excel reports like this, where you'd see no visibility of who last modified the report and when. You would not see what shared line set like the income statement were used. And then if you needed to make an edit, you'd have to open them all individually up to make edits. So that's why I love, and our customers love, the row, column, or tree. As I close out this window, let me also point out there's a button for just the line sets and an inventory of who last modified them and when in columns. And usually this information serves my purpose of who last edited that, how old it is, or whatever, and if it's used for a report or not. Now, additionally, we added a new feature a couple years back of what we call an activity log. So under Tools, Activity Log, what this is a very and much more detailed log of who made what exact change in the system and when. Here's a column of who, a time date stamp of when, and then here is what they maybe modified. And if I scroll down, you might say, oh, Derek maybe modified the report, or it might be a different line set or column that was edited here as I just scrolled downward. So those people being audited more strenuously this day and age, you'll have here, as I recap, under Tools, we have this very detailed activity log. Let me do one other side step related to that. That was a new feature coming from one of our customers. And under the Home ribbon, all of you existing customers have access to this button, what's called Feedback and Support. And I call that a red hot ticket line, phone line into our support and development teams, because really two functions within this window. It might be a product suggestion, or the buttons to the right, it might be a little issue or error or support request that you might want to contact us ASAP for. just give it a quick title, your email, and then once you click submit, it automatically generates a little support case ticket for you that we all keep track of. We hop on that immediately, a large team that I always like to give kudos to our support and development team, especially through the eyes of our customers who praise them all the time. So thank you one and all behind the scenes that are helping us consultants in the front end and our customers. All right, let me now close out some of those activity logs. Now for the next key element, one was earlier what I called the drill down and changing a drill order, but I was demonstrating that earlier as a person that had only access to one single company and only one single location like Denver. But now I'm in maybe your shoes. I'm looking at my entire organization, a multi-company and multiple location. I'm going to analyze sales again, but this time when I drill in, instead of going immediately to the different departments of the one location, I'm first of all like to analyze by company first of all. So here's a line for company 1 US, company 2 Europe, and even these eliminations might not be stored in any general ledger. We interface with about 30 plus ERP systems and versions. So the odds are we can link directly to that data, but there's another example of non-GL data I could link to, like for elimination, headcount, units sold, payroll budgeting, by units, products budgeting, and or capturing actual, as I share some real customer examples of how we deployed Prospero to think outside the box of what you might be manually doing today. Now that was my first click when I drilled in to company, and then my second click down to the different locations. Now at any stage of the way, I'm going to close out the locations, which was my second click. This is the company, which is my first click. And then what I'm going to now do is I have the ability to change the drill order using this icon on the toolbar. Now I usually define what my default order of analysis is, like top down. Usually I like to analyze company, big picture first, then location secondly, then department third if I continue to drill in. But what I'm now going to do is let me drag department to the top, or maybe that's my product segment. So when I click OK, instead of company 1, 2, then location A, B, I'm now drilling immediately to department, or let's call it product segment that we have in our general ledger. At any stage of the way, the good old graphing we saw earlier, and then I could further drill beyond that and even change it to the report view as I did earlier. Like sometimes I like to just do a quick little sentence recap of key concepts. All right. And then as I wrap up that little thought, that is our ease ability on what we call changing the drill order. Now notice here when I drag department to the top, there's instances where maybe you don't want to go 4 or 5 layers deep based on your general ledger segments, or maybe based on your levels that you or nodes of your tree, and I'll elaborate on that in just a second. But I could come up here and drag account detail first, because here now, instead of doing about 5 clicks deep, once I click into department that gets subtotaled first, I'm going immediately to account level detail, which I'll wrap up with that illustration. So now when I drill in, there's my one click by department, or we'll call it product. Then immediately I'm going down to the next level, account level detail, which sometimes this might be a few rows, or it could be 100 or 1,000. So there's now my lowest level without having to go few layers or segments deep. We call that account level detail, as I'll give you one last visual that you can drag and drop these. I did make a comment that I can define this drill order ahead of time or change it on the fly very nimbly. Otherwise, in your past life or our competition, you'd have to have a second, third, or fourth report in your old ways or competitors versus what Prospero can do in one report. And I'm going to go back one step to the report definition itself, as I was emphasizing the line or column being used for the report. And I'm going to come here on the Options tab. So here is where I can define that drill order any predefined way and change it on the fly thereafter. Another key concept we saw a few times earlier was our charting ability. There's no smoke and mirrors. We're always transparent to show you features and functionalities here. And all you have to do for graphing is turn on a little check mark to allow the chart view, and then choose from our various different chart types. Or in other words, you do not have to be an Excel graph or guru, nor You do not have to buy an extra third-party application like Power BI or dashboarding tool that usually is an added cost or license with most other competition here. All right, let me now talk about one of the great features to avoid and reduce report maintenance is what we call using summary accounts and the expand feature. So in this income statement, I'm going to call this a detail. I'm going to come and show some hidden columns, like here's a button on the toolbar, show a hidden column. Now my simple example for the hidden column, as I'm going to hide or show, is just showing the account number. Or a second example might be my actuals for the month or year. Let's say it's my year-to-date total. Maybe I'm hiding all my monthly totals, as I just gave you two examples of maybe hidden columns. We also have the ability to show hidden lines. As I continue with the summary account and the expand, here is where on this detailed income statement I have a line for total expenses. Above this row, I want to show the detail, and I'm going to show every single account. So I'm going to take us now to the line set of this report, and how I can easily accomplish that design is I could do things the old-fashioned way, meaning like in the Microsoft era, to show a detailed income statement, you had to bring in and show the individual accounts. That's the old bad way. Now the new good way within Prospero is for expenses, it's only one single line, even though we saw maybe about 30 or 40 individual accounts, because I'm now showing you this little pick list of account, either in the graphical tree view we saw earlier, or if I turn that off and I could then look at a numerical list view of my account. But I'll come back in here, the natural account window that I'm in. I'm going to look at the graphical tree view. Now, usually most organizations only have one account roll-up tree, but in our demonstration database, we have a couple because when we're talking about cash flow budgeting, maybe I have a couple of accounts like depreciation and bonus that are grouped differently for my statement of cash flow or budgeting. But here, net income, I usually have one master tree that handles all my balance sheet and income statement reports. You define what these names and subgroups are beneath it based on your different report groupings. So here, for an example, we have gross profit as a subgroup, and then we might have revenue and cost of goods sold, and then finally, cost of goods sold, I might have labor, material, and even some other accounts or ranges beneath it. Now let me go back to our expenses node of the tree, because here, simply, I defined a nice little account range of all accounts 6,000 to 7,999. Or in other words, as I add new general ledger accounts to my general ledger, I do not have to update them in Prospero, nor I do not have to update the tree, since I'm using a range or wildcard, nor I do not have to update this line set that oftentimes is used definitely for report, but also for budget data entry. We're simply here in the background saying, hey, show me the detail above this row. And then finally, what 0 means is show me every individual account. But a second example might be within cost of goods sold. I might say, only show me one level down on a summary report, which one level beneath cost of goods sold might be labor and material. So that's what this field here of levels implies. 0 means every individual account, or I could maybe say one level down, two levels down, etc., based on how you schemed up your tree that matches your company's layout of your financials. But one time only, we set up very efficiently to handle all your financial reports. Now I want to take this one step further. I'm showing you a read-only view of the account tree, but great, I can see the relationship between these roll-ups and groupings, because most other products I work with, even to this day, over 25 years doing this, I don't see this nice little graphical representation, headings and numbers, and see what the children are beneath it. Nor often our competitors won't allow us to do ranges like this. Let's look now behind the scenes at trees. We're going to look at two different trees. First of all, on our natural account segment, like our net income tree we were just focusing on. Or secondly, I'm going to look at the locational tree. Now this same expense little node, what I can easily do is right click, and I want to see where that's used within the system. So here nicely, it tells me that, hey, Derek, you're referencing maybe this salary or total expense line in all these different reports or budget templates here, and these line definitions. So that way, if I make a change, I don't have to go back to the Excel hell. I just make a change once and hopefully not at all, maybe when I'm using ranges and wildcards. Now, if your chart of accounts is not cleanly numbered, like obviously we gave you a simple example, but here are some other examples of it could be ranges, wildcards, or individual accounts. And then when you work with trees, you simply would either insert individual accounts or a range. And what's very nice too about Prospero is it gives us great checks and balances and reconciliation of our trees. I'm going to ad hoc, and I'm going to add this account 1100 to the system, because one great thing of 2 or 3 is as I now work further with that tree, I'm going to right click and insert one more time. I'll do the range next. This tree is going to get smaller and smaller. Since I added account 1100, it's no longer in this pick list. So these are the accounts that are not yet in the tree. We call these the orphans. So I can see what accounts are missing. And then additionally, the system prevents us from obviously duplicates as well. If I tried to add a range, which I'll demonstrate now, like I'll just call this test. And I could do the range in one of 2 ways. I'll do it the sort of more character way, like accounts 1100 through 1199. Or the more efficient way is the button called wildcard, maybe the accounts with a 11 prefix followed by a wildcard. If I were to click OK, there's the other great checks and balances saying, oops, sorry, you cannot do that because this account already exists here in the tree. Like I added this 1100 in the background. So that ensures data integrity of your financials. And this is one master tree that usually handles all your income statement, balance sheet, and cash flows. And then I'll go back one last little full circle click. That is 2 things. One is any of your trees, maybe the consultants help you set up initially. Maybe right click to insert to see what orphan accounts are missing. Sometimes even create a note of the tree called orphans in case so. And then secondly, I right clicked and where used, meaning, all right, the summary account for total expense, where is it used throughout the application? It might be in different lines or column prompts or filters. All right, so there's our great trees on the account segment, which is a little bit different than normal trees most people have seen on the location and department. And let me just show you briefly in the location. Here maybe are 2 different trees. Now here is a divisional tree. Like here is sales and service, because I have San Francisco within each of these. And this is what we call our functional tree. Now, alternatively, maybe I want to roll up all of San Francisco together, maybe to analyze their operations. So that's easily now this last tree called regional I'm opening up. And it could be ranges or wildcards like the Midwest using a wildcard or individual items up above. And what's great now is any one single report, which I'm going to come back to, when I run it, like I was just emphasizing location and the trees on location just then, I could, based on my security access, which is always a little bullet point or footnote security access I'll segue to, depends on what I'm able to see or pick in this list. Now looking at the location, here's maybe 3 trees. Tree number 1, the all tree, we heard earlier. Great, automatically created and maintained. Never have to touch and do. Or secondly, here might be I want to run the report and analyze it by division if I drill down beneath, or maybe I want to analyze it by region and drill down maybe to see that subtotal next. So one report could toggle between those easily. Okay. Keyword I just mentioned was security. Okay, so there's at least one little quick thing on user types, usually Windows authentication, IT, and we recommend utilizing. The next concept was our roles or groups here, that you can come up here and add any role as you wish, even rename these ones that come out of the box. And then the key thing is what this role or group has permission to do. Like I'm currently on the role called designer. which are those people in the finance and accounting area. So in the setup area, yeah, they're helping me in the finance and accounting area set up reports, trees, and different reports. But looking at maybe a viewer, in contrast, they do not have any of these setup buttons turned on. They simply view reports. Well, there might be, let's say, regional controllers that, how about I have some UK London office that maybe I want them to run reports, as I'll just call out maybe 2 or 3 key bullet points here without rattling off all of them that I rarely change or do myself. So here's one button, whether or not they can run reports on demand. Otherwise, usually what I do is I publish it out singly and centrally for them, usually via report collection, which I'll be segueing to. All right, then a couple other things here. Can they annotate, add notes to the report? Can they view published reports or drill down to the transaction detail? Just to name a few. And then here's another button that there might be some CFO or controllers who get to see all data, meaning every company, location, department. However, if that's turned off, like it currently is for this group, then what we would do is we would assign them what access they have regarding data. So I'll use this one user, let's call it Bob, or how about this user is what we'll call Sally. So how about Sally? And this button called assignments is what Sally, when he or she logs in, what they can see data-wise. So here is our general ledger company and segments, and I'll just use a more concrete physical one because currently we see the little asterisk or wild card, which means this user gets access to all companies, but how about let's role play, nope, only company 1. Or secondly, as I'm going to pick on this bottom line for the location, similar type of story. It can be an individual location, like location A, B, or C. Or better yet, how about Derek is in charge of Midwest. So I'm going to give Derek this one summary node, which were all my 4 prefixed ones. So in the future, hopefully I don't have to update the tree, nor maybe I do not have to update Derek's Midwest security as new locations come on board, which a huge win over the Microsoft era, because I could probably tell you a bunch of bad, old, painful ways the Microsoft products had that we've learned and made super easy and efficient. And I could continue going on some additional other general ledger segments and or down to the line and the account level. But I'll save that maybe for another discussion. But there's the key picture of assignments. My user, and in the toolbar, the assignments button. Now, finally, related to security, the last key concept to acquaint you with regarding our tips and crash course is what we call visibility. How about in the report side? Then I'll talk about the budget in just a second. How about in the report side? Let me compare 2 reports, a balance sheet versus an income statement. How about on the income statement? Yes, you have access to, but the balance sheet not. So what I'll do is let me just close all windows so I don't break something for later in my broadcast today. I'm going to now go to report. Here's an income statement. And then I have this button called visibility. Well, maybe I want all my users to view this report. And if they do, am I going to allow them to run the report? Like I might have that regional controller in London I described. Now, this applies to everybody, but maybe not. Maybe I'm going to turn these off, and then down below, I can get more granular. And when I get more granular, it's more efficient at the role or group level, but even I can define who can have visibility of this report even down to the user level. So here might be, let's just say this is my London role or group. I can click on the insert button, and then maybe this might be the oddball thereafter. So I'll pause in this window, but the toolbar icon, I was on my income statement, not the balance sheet, but this income statement, I came to the visibility button of either everybody or specific roles or users. Now, there was a button back in security that maybe there are some groups like, I'll call it my finance and CFO group of maybe 5 or 6 people. Maybe they have access to all reports. So one little button I want just to call your attention to was this little button here called View All Reports here. So here's this last button right here, visibility to all reports. And sometimes I'll create a separate roller group, maybe with viewing all data, regardless of assignment, or maybe viewing all reports, regardless of visibility. Okay, good. Just want to at least go full circle with that thought. Now, when I mentioned budget, I'm probably just going to plug a couple of budget notes. One is get out of Excel. Hell, I probably see about half the people, yes, are using Prospero budgeting, the other not. So do leverage Prospero for your budgeting, because how about here? I'm going back to my end user for just a 1-minute plug on the budgeting module. Here is where this budget is now real-time in red within the Prospero system, avoiding all the Excel pains and inefficiencies. On my quick launch, as I take one step back, I was the manager. I was opening up my report comparing actual versus budget, but how about it's that time of year you want me to do budget input? And I'm going to open up what I'm going to call Department A. Now it looks like Excel, but really it is using the same row, column, or tree, what we call Excel on steroids, and leveraging the Prospero database behind the scenes to do that real-time consolidation within our trees and reusing our same line and column, etc. Now here is Department A. I'm simply going to open up Department B. And third and finally, I'm going to open up Department C here. And really this is going to prove out that these two departments that I'm opening up, they have the exact same look and feel, meaning they have the exact same line set. We call that overrides. Now these first two departments use the exact same line set overrides because maybe these are expense only departments. And then third and finally, I'm going to now open up a Department C, like Charlie, I'll call it, that has both revenue and cost of goods sold detail. And those that are sticking around, I'm going to be doing a session later today talking about budget tips and tricks. But here is now, in yellow especially, here's a different line set template because this might be a department or location that has revenue and cost of goods sold. And here in yellow is another example of non-general ledger data, because products like product 10 motors or product 20 compressors, that is not a segment in my general ledger, but I can easily budget and or record actuals to. Just like on one of my earlier budget screens, here is some of my salaries that I'm budgeting. And then I can come here on the HR detail tab and it by the person's name, like Bob and Sally, or by their position. Maybe I need this many registered nurses, this many technicians, etc. All right, so I'll just probably leave this little budget screen as is and maybe join us for a future session on it, but wanted to sort of seamlessly tie in all the budget and actuals as another efficient tip in this regard. And let me go ahead and conclude today by, I'm going to look at the question log here in just a second. As usually the last few minutes I wrap up with that. But what another little agenda item on my list was sharing with you report collections and publishing reports out. Okay, I'm going to go back to my power user because I had ran this one report. Let's role play. I did all my journal entries just moments ago. I'm going to review my data as I'm now pulling up. I like the data that I see. And then what I'm going to simply do is this button on the toolbar called Publish. That just means, hey, this is now going to be in the nice little blessed area of my static final copies of the report. I can scheme up any folders imaginable that might be date-driven or report-driven, like here's my balance sheet or cash flows, or maybe group-driven. Like here might be my board of directors, or here might be my UK group of people, etc. We'll get to these little publish report folders in just a second, but if I click OK, I'll get a confirmation saying, hey, great, you've now published that report out, which means now it's generally available to those people, especially those users who do not have report run privileges, which also might be a privilege you want to give people to maybe run reports on demand at any time of the day, like my UK or London controller example, or maybe an end user not running reports. Within the published reports, I can easily come up here and right-click to create some new folders. These are different reports, and I might have different versions of the report, and I like to keep things simple, Rarely do I have old historic folders because never do I go back in time to look at old reports that don't have new current data. Instead, I like to see, let's say, a rolling 12-month or this year, last year comparison. But you might want a little bit of cleanup and maintenance here. So here is this one report. Looks like we ran it twice. Now, when end users launch within their quick launch area, they pull up the last generated report. However, you might see, or they, older versions, so you might want to just come up here and easily delete an old version if it was preliminary data you don't want them having, it you might have published earlier. And I can delete multiple reports and or versions all at one time, but there's sort of the key concept of inserting folders and or deleting some stuff over time within the publish report area. Also, the publish report area difference is when I demonstrated adding an annotation, that's the area I was in. Publish reports is where you can add these annotations of nice little financial footnotes to be consumed by others thereafter. And how about finally, on the report collection, let me go full circle back, because how about me, the CFO? I like to see these 4 reports every morning, and maybe I'm just going to generate it all in one fell swoop, these multiple reports. As I go back to the power user, inside this area called report collections, I could right mouse click and create a new report collection, giving it any name. And to save time, I'll just pull up an existing one here. Like here's my month-end reports. Now currently, I have 3 reports in this group, but I can click on the add button or remove, and I'll come up and add another report. And I'll just ad hoc just choose anyone in this little pick list. All right, and going back to the role play, like, okay, I just did my journal entries. I know everything's in. I simply just click this button once. I'm running all these reports in one fell swoop. Now looking at the output tab and some of my earlier demonstrations, well, I could output to the workspace, what I call the viewer, or maybe I showed you that one report output to Excel, maybe the PDF, or better yet, let's maybe output it to the publish report like I was just consuming and looking at the different folders on what we'll call our August 2021 reports in the publish report area. If I were to choose, let's say, an Excel file, just be aware of this little check mark. I could create a single output file. And let's just look back to that briefly. So here is maybe the board member. Here's report number 1, income statement. Report number 2, balance sheet. Report number 3, cash flow. Report collection to one single file. All right, my time is starting to dwindle, so let me come up and pull up my contact information in case you have subsequent questions. I'm now also going to have us monitor the little question queue and log, so give me just a minute as I do so. And let me just come back to one of the original slides that might be a little bit more intro here. All right, there might be just a minute or two of a little pause here as I'm going to go through the little question panel, an extra window or two behind the scenes here. Okay. Looks like we don't have any questions, maybe 1 or 2 that came through the queue I think I've already addressed, so good news in that regard. So how about I'll just wind it down saying a big thank you today. We usually send out a nice little thank you email for those that attended and or registered, which we'll also in a couple of days put out on our website, a nice little link to this recording. Otherwise, have a good rest of your day. Call or email anytime, and we'll look for you at a future event. Goodbye.